You're born in complete darkness, deep beneath the surface of the ocean where sunlight has never touched. Your mother doesn't hold you, doesn't feed you, doesn't even know you exist. She released millions of eggs into the water weeks ago, and you were just one of them, floating, drifting, hoping to survive long enough to become something more than fish food. You start as nothing more than a microscopic speck, smaller than a grain of sand, with no arms, no mouth, no brain. You can't think, can't choose where to go, can't even control your own movement. The ocean currents carry you wherever they want, spinning you through the water like a piece of debris. Around you, millions of your siblings are doing the same, or they were, until something ate them. The water is alive with predators. Jellyfish drift by with their trailing tentacles, sweeping through the plankton clouds and swallowing everything in their path. Fish with mouths like vacuum cleaners cruise past, sucking up anything small enough to fit. You dodge one threat, only to drift straight into another. Most of your siblings just don't make it past the first day. You barely do, but somehow you survive long enough for something incredible to happen. Your body starts changing. What was once a simple blob begins to stretch and reshape itself. Tiny cilia, microscopic hairs, sprout from your surface, beating in rhythm to push you through the water. You're still impossibly small, but now you can move with purpose. You can swim toward food, away from danger, up toward the light. For weeks, you exist as this strange, swimming creature that looks nothing like what you'll eventually become. You feed on even smaller organisms, bacteria, and algae that float through the water like invisible dust. Every meal is a victory because every moment you're not eating, something else is trying to eat you. The ocean doesn't care about your potential. It only cares about survival. Then comes the most dangerous moment of your life so far. The moment you have to choose where to spend the rest of your existence. Your body has been preparing for this, developing sensory organs that can detect the perfect spot to settle down. You need a hard surface, something stable, but not just any surface will do. It has to be the right texture, the right chemical composition, the right distance from other starfish. You drift closer to the seafloor, testing surfaces with your primitive sensors. Too soft, and you'll sink into the mud. Too crowded, and you'll compete for food with creatures that are already established. Too exposed, and the currents will tear you apart before you can attach. You have one chance to get this right. Choose poorly, and you die. Choose well, and you might live for decades. Finally, you find it. A rocky outcrop with just the right feel. You settle onto the surface and begin the most dramatic transformation of your life. Your swimming organs dissolve away because you'll never need them again. Your body flattens against the rock and starts secreting a powerful adhesive that will anchor you in place. This is terrifying and irreversible. Once you commit to this spot, there's no going back. Over the next few days, your body completely reorganizes itself. What was once symmetrical becomes radial. Arms begin to sprout from your central disc, slowly extending outward like the spokes of a wheel. Your mouth forms on your underside, directly pressed against the rock. Your primitive nervous system rewires itself to control this new, alien form. You're becoming something that would be unrecognizable to your swimming larval self. The transformation is exhausting. You can't hunt, can't defend yourself, can't do anything but hold on and hope nothing discovers you while you're vulnerable. Crabs scuttle overhead, their claws clicking against the rocks. Fish patrol the area, always searching for easy meals. Any one of them could end your story before it really begins, but you're small enough and still enough that most predators simply don't notice you. When the metamorphosis finally ends, you're no longer a drifting speck of plankton. You're a starfish, barely the size of a coin, but with all the basic equipment you'll need for the rest of your life. 5 arms radiate from your central body, each one lined with hundreds of tube feet that can extend and retract like tiny hydraulic pistons. Your mouth sits in the center of your underside, surrounded by a complex arrangement of plates and spines that make up your skeleton. You don't have a brain, but you don't need one. Your nervous system is distributed throughout your body like a biological internet, with each arm capable of acting independently while still coordinating with the others. It's a strange way to exist, but it works. When one arm detects food, the information spreads through your network, and your whole body responds. Your first meal as a proper starfish is nothing glamorous, a thin film of bacteria and algae scraped from the rock surface. You extend your stomach slightly out of your mouth, digest the food externally, then pull your stomach back inside. It's not elegant, but it's effective. This is how you'll eat for the rest of your life, turning your stomach inside out to digest prey that's often larger than your mouth. As you grow, your world expands beyond the small patch of rock where you first settled. Your tube feet, powered by a water-based hydraulic system, let you glide slowly across surfaces that would be impossible for other creatures to navigate. You can walk up vertical cliff faces, across the underside of overhangs, even upside down across cave ceilings. Gravity means nothing to you, but moving is expensive. Every step requires you to extend and retract tube feet, pressurizing and depressurizing your internal water system. You can't move fast. A snail would easily outrace you, but you can move with incredible precision and power. When you grab onto something, you don't let go unless you want to. The seafloor around you is a battlefield disguised as a peaceful landscape. Everything is trying to eat everything else, and you're both predator and prey. Small fish dart between the rocks, hunting for the tiny creatures that make up your diet. Crabs patrol their territories, claws ready to dismember anything that threatens them. Sea urchins cluster in the crevices, their spines creating no-go zones for most predators. And then there are the other starfish. Some are your own species, potential competitors for the same resources. Others are different species entirely, with their own hunting strategies and dietary preferences. A few are significantly larger than you, and they've been known to eat smaller starfish when other food is scarce. You learn to recognize their chemical signatures and avoid them when possible. Your first major hunt comes when you encounter a mussel bed. The mussels sit clustered together, their shells tightly closed, filtering nutrients from the water. To most predators, they're impregnable fortresses. Their shells are too hard to crack, too smooth to grip, too tightly sealed to pry open. But you have a secret weapon that makes you one of the ocean's most feared predators, despite your glacial speed. You position yourself over a mussel and extend your arms, wrapping them around the shell. Your hundreds of tube feet attach to the surface, each one capable of exerting a surprising amount of force. Individually, they're weak. Together, they're unstoppable. You begin to pull, applying steady, relentless pressure to the mussel's shell. The mussel fights back, using its powerful adductor muscles to keep its shell clamped shut. It's a battle of endurance, your hydraulic system against its muscular strength. Minutes pass, then hours. The mussel begins to tire, its muscles burning from the constant effort. You don't tire, you can maintain this pressure indefinitely. Finally, the shell opens just a crack, barely visible but enough. You don't need much space. Your stomach begins to emerge from your mouth, squeezing through the tiny gap between the shell halves. The mussel tries to close again, but your stomach is already inside, beginning to digest the soft tissues within. The battle is over. This is how you hunt, not with speed or strength, but with patience and persistence. You can open clams, mussels, oysters, any bivalve that thinks its shell makes it safe. You're the nightmare that every filter feeder has evolved to avoid, the predator that turns their greatest defense into irrelevance. As you grow larger, your menu expands. Barnacles, sea urchins, snails, even small crabs become potential prey. Your stomach can extend far from your mouth, reaching into crevices and around obstacles to digest prey in place. You don't need to bring food back to your mouth. You bring your digestive system to the food. But success brings new dangers. Larger predators notice you now. Sea otters, diving down from the surface, can grab you with their nimble paws and crack you open like a nut. Large crabs see you as a slow-moving meal, approaching with claws spread wide. Fish that once ignored you now view you as worth the effort to attack. Your best defense is your regenerative ability. Lose an arm to a predator, and you'll grow it back within months. Lose 2 arms, and you'll still survive. Lose 3, and you're in trouble, but not dead. As long as most of your central disc remains intact, you can rebuild whatever you've lost. It's a superpower that few other creatures possess, but it comes at a cost. Regeneration requires enormous amounts of energy and time. Life on the seafloor is a constant balance between risk and reward. Every hunt could be your last if a predator catches you in the open. Every day brings new challenges as the seasons change and the ocean currents shift. Some days, food is abundant and life is easy. Other days, you can search for hours without finding anything worth eating. The water temperature fluctuates with the seasons, affecting everything from your metabolism to your ability to move. When it's cold, you slow down dramatically, entering a state that's almost like hibernation. When it's warm, your body speeds up, but so does your need for food. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when conditions are about to change, shifts in current, changes in water chemistry, the behavior of other creatures. Your world is one of constant adaptation and survival, where every decision could determine whether you live or die. You learn to navigate the complex social dynamics of the reef community. Other starfish aren't just competition, they can be inadvertent allies. When one discovers a rich feeding ground, the chemical signals it releases while digesting prey attract others. You follow these scent trails through the water, your primitive senses detecting the molecular traces of a successful hunt from surprising distances. But following these trails is dangerous. The starfish that made the kill might not appreciate company, especially if food is scarce. You approach cautiously, testing the water for signs of aggression. Some species are territorial, willing to fight for their claims. Others are more tolerant, content to feed alongside neighbors as long as there's enough for everyone. Then there are the cleaners, tiny fish and crustaceans that make their living by removing parasites and dead tissue from larger creatures. They see you as a mobile cleaning station, darting in to pick at your surface whenever you pause. Most of the time, this relationship benefits everyone. They get a meal, and you get rid of irritating hitchhikers that could slow you down or make you sick. Occasionally, the cleaners get too aggressive, mistaking healthy tissue for dead material. When this happens, you have to make a choice: tolerate the damage or use your arms to brush them away. It's a delicate balance. Drive them all away, and parasites will accumulate. Let them take too much, and they'll weaken you enough to attract real predators. Your tube feet are constantly working, not just for movement, but for gathering information. Each one contains sensory cells that can detect changes in water pressure, chemical gradients, and vibrations. When a crab walks across the sand nearby, you feel the tremors through your feet. When a school of fish passes overhead, you sense the pressure waves from their swimming motions. This sensory network makes you aware of threats long before they become immediate dangers. A large fish circling overhead creates a specific pattern of pressure changes. A crab approaching from behind leaves a distinctive chemical trail. An octopus hunting in the area produces vibrations that your feet can distinguish from the background noise of the reef. The octopus is perhaps your most dangerous enemy. It's intelligent, fast, and equipped with a beak that can crack through your tough exterior with ease. Unlike other predators that rely on brute force, an octopus studies its prey, learning your patterns and weaknesses. It can squeeze into impossibly tight spaces, following you into crevices where you thought you were safe. When you detect an octopus in the area, everything changes. Your leisurely pace becomes urgent movement toward the nearest secure hiding spot. You abandon whatever you were doing and focus entirely on survival. The octopus hunts by ambush, using its camouflage to become invisible until the moment it strikes. Your only advantage is that you can fit into spaces too small for it to follow. Rock crevices become your refuges during these tense periods. You wedge yourself deep into narrow gaps, using your flexible body to squeeze into spaces that seem impossible. Your arms can bend and twist in ways that would break the bones of vertebrate creatures. When fully compressed, you can fit through openings barely wider than your central disc, but hiding has its own risks. While you're tucked away in a crevice, you're not feeding. Extended periods without food weaken you, making you more vulnerable when you finally have to emerge. It's a constant calculation. How long can you afford to hide versus how long you can survive without eating? The reef itself is constantly changing around you. Storms tear through the area, rearranging the landscape and destroying familiar landmarks. Strong currents shift sand and debris, burying some areas while exposing others. What was once a thriving mussel bed might be scoured away overnight, forcing you to find new hunting grounds. These changes can be opportunities as well as disasters. Storm damage often exposes creatures that normally hide deep in the reef structure. Currents might deposit new prey species in your area, expanding your dietary options. Shifting sands can reveal buried shellfish that have been waiting years for the right conditions to emerge. You learn to read the signs of coming changes. The behavior of other reef creatures often provides early warnings. Fish become more agitated before storms, swimming in tighter schools and seeking deeper water. Crabs retreat to their burrows and seal the entrances. Even the water itself feels different. Temperature shifts, current changes, and pressure variations that your sensitive tube feet can detect. When major storms approach, you face a critical decision. Stay in place and risk being torn from your anchor point by the violent currents, or move to a more secure location and risk being caught in the open when the worst conditions hit. There's no perfect choice, only calculated risks. If you choose to move, the journey becomes a race against time. Your slow pace, usually an advantage that conserves energy, becomes a liability when speed matters. You extend your tube feet in rapid succession, moving faster than you normally would, but burning through energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. Every moment in the open is dangerous, with debris flying through the water and currents strong enough to sweep you into areas where you can't survive. The storms that don't kill you often provide unexpected benefits. The violent water motion stirs up nutrients that have been trapped in sediments, creating feeding opportunities that might not occur for years under normal conditions. Dead and dying creatures, victims of the storm's violence, become available as food for scavengers. It's a harsh reminder that in the ocean, one creature's disaster is another's feast. Recovery from these events takes time. If you lost arms to flying debris or powerful currents, regeneration begins immediately, but progresses slowly. The new tissue grows from specialized cells at the injury site, gradually rebuilding the complex structures of tube feet, muscles, and nervous system. During this vulnerable period, you're less capable of hunting and more susceptible to predators, but regeneration offers possibilities that most creatures don't possess. If you lose an arm that contained damaged or infected tissue, the replacement grows back healthy. If an arm was grasped by a predator that you managed to escape, you can simply release it voluntarily and grow a new one later. This ability to sacrifice parts of yourself for survival is both a superpower and a survival strategy. Some encounters with predators become learning experiences rather than life-threatening emergencies. A young crab that tries to attack you quickly discovers that your tough exterior and ability to grip surfaces make you a difficult target. It might manage to tear off a tube foot or damage an arm tip, but the effort required usually isn't worth the small amount of nutrition you provide. These unsuccessful attacks teach both you and your would-be predators valuable lessons. You learn to recognize the body language and approach patterns that signal an impending attack. The predators learn that starfish aren't the easy meals they might appear to be. Over time, this mutual education reduces the frequency of these encounters. Your relationship with the substrate beneath you is intimate and complex. Every surface tells a story through texture, chemistry, and the microscopic life that coats it. Smooth rocks might indicate strong currents that scour away potential food. Rough surfaces often harbor more diverse communities of small organisms. Areas covered in algae suggest good growing conditions, but also competition from other grazers. You can taste the rock itself through chemical sensors in your tube feet. Different mineral compositions create distinct flavors that help you navigate and remember locations. Iron-rich rocks taste different from limestone. Volcanic substrates have their own signature. Over time, you build a mental map of your territory based on these chemical landmarks. This chemical navigation becomes crucial during the darker periods when visibility drops to near zero. Deep water filters out most sunlight, but even in shallower areas, storms and seasonal changes can dramatically reduce the light available. Your tube feet become your primary navigation tools, feeling their way across familiar terrain and detecting the chemical traces that mark safe routes. Food sources change with the seasons and environmental conditions. During some periods, filter-feeding mollusks dominate the available prey. In others, sea urchins become more abundant. Occasionally, unusual conditions bring creatures into your territory that you rarely encounter. Different species of snails, unusual types of barnacles, or even small fish that become trapped in tide pools. Each new type of prey requires you to develop new hunting strategies. What works for mussels might not work for sea urchins, whose spines present a different challenge than shells. Barnacles, with their cone-shaped shells and different opening mechanisms, require adjustments to your typical approach. Learning these techniques takes time and often involves unsuccessful attempts that leave you hungry and frustrated. The most challenging prey are those that can move quickly enough to escape your grasp. Small crabs, certain types of snails, and fish that venture too close to your hiding spots require patience and timing rather than brute force. You learn to position yourself along their expected routes, waiting motionless until they come within range of a lightning-fast grab. Success with mobile prey brings a different kind of satisfaction than the slow conquest of a well-defended mussel. The quick strike, the successful capture, the immediate reward. These moments of triumph break up the otherwise methodical pace of your existence. They also provide valuable protein and nutrients that static prey sometimes lack, but mobile prey fights back more violently. A captured crab will use its claws to attack your arms, potentially causing significant damage before you can subdue it. Small fish thrash with surprising strength, and their scales can be difficult to grip. Learning to handle struggling prey without losing your meal or suffering serious injury requires practice and patience. Your digestive system adapts to handle this variety of food sources. The enzymes you produce can break down different types of proteins, shells, and organic compounds. Your stomach can expand to accommodate larger meals or contract when food is scarce. This flexibility allows you to take advantage of whatever opportunities present themselves. The ocean around you pulses with rhythms both obvious and subtle: tidal cycles, seasonal changes, day and night patterns. You learn to synchronize your activities with these natural rhythms, timing your hunts for periods when prey is most vulnerable and predators are least active. Tidal movements create the most predictable patterns in your world. When the water recedes, creatures that normally hide in deep crevices become exposed. Mussels that rely on constant water flow for feeding become stressed and vulnerable. Tide pools form temporary prisons for small fish and crabs that miscalculated their escape routes. You learn to position yourself along the tide lines, ready to take advantage of these twice-daily opportunities. But tides also bring dangers. Strong currents can dislodge you from your carefully chosen positions, sweeping you into areas where the substrate is wrong or the competition too fierce. You develop strategies for weathering these flows, wedging yourself into stable cracks, gripping with extra tube feet, or simply riding the current to new hunting grounds when resistance becomes futile. The night hours transform your world completely. Many of the fish that patrol during daylight hours retreat to deeper water or hide in coral formations. Nocturnal hunters emerge from their daytime hiding spots. Different species of crabs, night-active fish, and other predators that operate in darkness. The chemical landscape changes too, as different organisms release different compounds during their nighttime activities. You adapt your behavior to take advantage of these shifts. Some prey becomes more accessible at night when their daytime predators aren't around. Others become more dangerous as nocturnal hunters begin their patrols. Your tube feed become even more important in darkness, reading vibrations and chemical signals that your limited vision can't process. Temperature fluctuations affect every aspect of your existence. Cold water slows your metabolism, making you move like you're trapped in thick syrup. Your tube feet respond more slowly to nerve signals. Your digestive processes crawl to near standstills, and your reaction times stretch to dangerous lengths. But cold water also slows your prey and many of your predators, creating a different kind of balance. Warm water brings the opposite challenges. Your metabolism accelerates, demanding more food to fuel your increased activity levels. You move faster, but burn through energy reserves at rates that can become unsustainable if hunting isn't successful. Warm water also accelerates the decomposition of any food you've cached, forcing you to consume meals more quickly or risk losing them to bacterial decay. Seasonal changes bring migrations through your territory. Schools of fish that normally live in deeper water might pass through during their spawning runs. Juvenile crabs disperse from their nursery areas, creating temporary abundance of small, manageable prey. These events are unpredictable bonanzas that can provide enough nutrition to sustain you through leaner periods. But seasonal changes also bring departures. Prey species that form the backbone of your diet might migrate to different areas, following temperature gradients or food availability. Suddenly, hunting grounds that supported you for months become barren. You're forced to either follow the migration, a dangerous journey across unfamiliar terrain, or adapt to whatever prey remains behind. During these lean periods, competition intensifies dramatically. Other starfish begin expanding their hunting ranges, venturing into territories they normally avoid. The chemical signals that once marked clear boundaries become contested zones where encounters with your own species turn aggressive. You learn to recognize the stress pheromones that indicate when another starfish is desperate enough to fight rather than retreat. These confrontations rarely involve direct violence. Instead, they become tests of persistence and resource access. Two starfish might find themselves competing for the same mussel bed, each trying to outlast the other's patience. The winner isn't necessarily the larger or stronger. It's often the one with better energy reserves or more efficient hunting techniques. You develop a mental catalog of your competitor's strengths and weaknesses. That large starfish near the eastern boundary is powerful but slow to react. The smaller one that hunts the southern tide pools is quick but lacks the grip strength for larger prey. Understanding these individual differences helps you choose your battles and avoid confrontations you're unlikely to win. Some conflicts resolve through chemical communication rather than physical confrontation. Starfish release complex mixtures of compounds that convey information about size, health, recent feeding success, and willingness to fight. You learn to interpret these chemical messages, adjusting your behavior based on what they reveal about potential competitors. Occasionally, you encounter starfish of different species with completely different hunting strategies. Some specialize in soft-bodied prey like sea anemones and sponges. Others focus on detritus and organic matter that settles in sandy areas. These species rarely compete directly with you, but their presence changes the local ecosystem in subtle ways. The reef community operates on complex networks of interaction that extend far beyond simple predator-prey relationships. The creatures you hunt also serve as food for other predators, creating competition at multiple levels. When a population of mussels declines due to your hunting pressure, it affects the crabs that also rely on them, the fish that eat both mussels and crabs, and even the scavengers that clean up the remains. You become part of these intricate webs of cause and effect, your actions rippling through the community in ways you can't fully comprehend. Your success in hunting mussels might allow a population of sea urchins to expand into areas previously dominated by filter feeders. The urchins then alter the algae communities, which affects the small fish that graze on algae, which in turn impacts the larger predators that hunt those fish. These ecosystem dynamics create feedback loops that can work for or against you. A successful hunting season might temporarily reduce your preferred prey, forcing you to develop new skills or target different species, but it might also reduce competition from other predators that relied on the same food sources, creating new opportunities you hadn't anticipated. Disease and parasites add another layer of complexity to your existence. The warm, nutrient-rich waters that support abundant prey also provide ideal conditions for pathogens. Bacterial infections can enter through wounds, spreading through your water vascular system and potentially killing you if your immune responses can't contain them. Some parasites specialize in starfish, having evolved specifically to exploit your unique biology. They might target your tube feet, impairing your ability to move and hunt. Others focus on your digestive system, stealing nutrients before you can absorb them. A few particularly nasty species can actually manipulate your behavior, making you more likely to venture into dangerous areas where the parasite can complete its life cycle. Your immune system operates differently from vertebrate immunity. Instead of circulating antibodies, you rely on specialized cells that patrol your body cavity and attack foreign organisms directly. These cellular defenders can often contain small infections, but they're less effective against parasites that have evolved countermeasures specifically for starfish immune responses. Recovery from illness requires the same patience that characterizes all aspects of starfish life. You can't simply rest and heal like more active creatures. Instead, you must continue hunting and moving while your body fights off infection, balancing the energy demands of survival with the resources needed for immune function. Environmental toxins present subtle but persistent threats. Pollutants that accumulate in the sediments where you hunt can build up in your tissues over time. Heavy metals, pesticide residues, and industrial chemicals that reach the ocean eventually make their way into the food web, concentrating in predators like you who consume large quantities of filter-feeding prey. These toxins rarely cause immediate death, but they can impair your systems in ways that make survival increasingly difficult. Nerve function might become less reliable, reducing your ability to coordinate complex movements. Digestive efficiency can decline, forcing you to hunt more frequently to obtain the same nutritional benefits. Regeneration might slow, leaving you vulnerable for longer periods after injury. The effects are often so gradual that you adapt to them without realizing your capabilities have diminished. What once seemed like normal aging might actually be the accumulation of environmental damage. The distinction becomes academic, whether your declining performance results from natural senescence or toxin exposure. The survival challenges remain the same. Other starfish in your area show similar patterns of subtle decline, suggesting environmental factors rather than individual health issues. The entire community adapts to new baselines of performance, with younger individuals never knowing that conditions were once better. This generational shift in expectations masks the true extent of environmental degradation. Yet despite these challenges, you continue to thrive in your slowly changing world. Your species has survived for millions of years, adapting to ice ages, mass extinctions, and dramatic shifts in ocean chemistry. The current changes, while significant, represent just another chapter in an ongoing story of adaptation and survival. Your individual life contributes to this larger narrative of species resilience. Every successful hunt, every predator evaded, every injury healed adds to the collective experience that shapes starfish evolution. The techniques you develop through trial and error might be passed on through chemical signals to other members of your species, contributing to a distributed learning network that spans generations. The ocean around you continues its eternal rhythms, indifferent to your struggles, but providing the stage for your daily dramas of survival. Each dawn brings new opportunities and new dangers. Each tide carries different possibilities. Each season reshuffles the deck of environmental conditions, forcing you to adapt or perish. Your slow-motion existence unfolds against this backdrop of constant change, a testament to the power of persistence over speed, patience over aggression, and adaptation over resistance. You are both insignificant and essential, one small predator among millions, yet a crucial component of the complex systems that maintain the ocean's balance. The story of your life continues to write itself with each movement of your tube feet, each successful hunt, each narrow escape from danger. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new tests of your remarkable ability to survive in one of Earth's most demanding environments. The years pass, and your body grows steadily larger. What started as a coin-sized creature now spans the width of a dinner plate. Your arms have thickened and lengthened, each one packed with hundreds more tube feet than you had as a juvenile. Your central disc has expanded to accommodate a more complex digestive system and the reproductive organs that are finally beginning to mature. With size comes new capabilities and new responsibilities. You can now tackle prey that would have been impossible to handle when you were smaller. Large sea urchins, their spines no longer an insurmountable defense, become regular targets. You've learned to approach them from angles that minimize spine contact, using your arms to flip them over and expose their vulnerable undersides. The technique took months to perfect, and you still bear scars from your early clumsy attempts. Your hunting territory has expanded dramatically. Where you once rarely ventured more than a few meters from your original settlement site, you now patrol an area covering several square kilometers of seafloor. You know every rock formation, every crevice, every patch of sand in your domain. This intimate knowledge of the terrain gives you enormous advantages over both prey and predators who are less familiar with the local geography, but expansion brings you into contact with other large starfish who have their own established territories. These encounters require delicate negotiation through chemical signals and positioning. You've learned to recognize the scent markers that indicate where another starfish considers their territory to begin. Respecting these boundaries usually prevents direct confrontation, but the borders shift constantly as individuals die, relocate, or change their ranging patterns. Your senses have sharpened considerably with age and experience. You can now detect the chemical signature of a wounded crab from remarkable distances, following scent trails through the water that would have been undetectable to your younger self. Your tube feet have developed sensitivity to vibrations that allows you to feel the approach of potential threats or prey through the substrate long before they become visible. The most significant change, however, is the awakening of your reproductive instincts. For the first time in your life, you're driven by something other than hunger and survival. Deep within your body, reproductive organs have been developing, preparing for the moment when you'll contribute to the next generation of your species. The urge to reproduce doesn't come as a sudden revelation. It builds gradually, like a tide that rises so slowly you barely notice until it's overwhelming. Environmental cues trigger the final maturation of your reproductive system. Water temperature, day length, lunar cycles, and chemical signals from other starfish all combine to tell your body that the time is approaching. You begin producing and releasing pheromones that advertise your readiness to mate, chemical messages that drift through the water to attract potential partners. The response is immediate and dramatic. Other mature starfish in the area begin converging on your location, following the chemical trails you've laid down. Some approach cautiously, testing the water for signs of competition or danger. Others move with the confidence of individuals who have been through this process many times before. The gathering creates a complex web of chemical communication as each individual assesses the others. Starfish reproduction is both simple and spectacular. You don't engage in complex courtship rituals or physical mating. Instead, you release your genetic material directly into the water, trusting that the timing and chemistry are right for successful fertilization. But the coordination required for this process is remarkable. Dozens of individuals must synchronize their releases to maximize the chances of success. The trigger comes from the first starfish to begin spawning. Their release of gametes sends chemical signals through the water that stimulate others to follow suit. Within minutes, the entire aggregation is contributing to a massive cloud of eggs and sperm that drifts with the current. You feel your body responding to the chemical cues, muscles contracting to force your reproductive cells out through specialized openings in your arms. The sensation is unlike anything you've experienced before, a massive release that leaves you temporarily exhausted but strangely satisfied. Around you, the water is thick with the genetic material of dozens of starfish, creating one of the ocean's most important reproductive events. Millions of eggs drift in the current, each one carrying the potential to become a new member of your species. Your role in reproduction ends with that release. Unlike creatures that care for their young, you provide no parental investment beyond the initial genetic contribution. The fertilized eggs will drift as plankton for weeks, developing into the same kind of swimming larvae that you once were. Most will be eaten before they have a chance to settle and metamorphose. A few will survive to face the same challenges you've overcome. The spawning event leaves you depleted and vulnerable. The energy required to produce millions of reproductive cells has drained your reserves significantly. Your movements are slower, your reactions less sharp. For several days after spawning, you're at increased risk from predators and less effective at hunting. It's a necessary vulnerability, the price of ensuring your species' continuation. Recovery requires intensive feeding and careful energy management. You focus on easier prey during this period, avoiding the energy-expensive hunts that characterize your normal behavior. Small, weak creatures that you might normally ignore become worthwhile targets when you're operating at reduced capacity. Your body prioritizes rebuilding reproductive organs for potential future spawning events over other physiological needs. The post-spawning period also triggers changes in your territorial behavior. The intense focus on reproduction fades, replaced by a need to rebuild and prepare for the next seasonal cycle. Some of the chemical markers you've been releasing change, signaling to other starfish that you're no longer in reproductive mode. The temporary aggregations that formed for spawning begin to disperse as individuals return to their normal ranging patterns. But reproductive maturity has permanently altered your relationship with your environment. You now participate in the complex chemical communication networks that coordinate spawning events across wide areas of the seafloor. Your body has become a sensor and broadcaster in a biological internet that extends far beyond your individual territory. Years of spawning cycles begin to take their toll. Each reproductive event requires enormous energy investment, and the cumulative effect gradually weakens your overall condition. Your arms don't regenerate quite as quickly after injury. Your grip strength begins to decline, making it harder to hold on to struggling prey. Your movements become more deliberate as your hydraulic system loses efficiency. These changes happen so gradually that you adapt without conscious awareness of your declining capabilities. You adjust your hunting strategies to match your changing abilities, focusing more on ambush techniques that require patience rather than strength. You become more selective about which prey to pursue, avoiding confrontations that might have been worthwhile when you were younger and stronger. Your territory begins to contract as maintaining your previous ranging patterns becomes too energy expensive. You focus your activities on the most productive areas, abandoning marginal hunting grounds to younger, more energetic competitors. This territorial compression forces you into more frequent contact with other aging starfish who are undergoing similar adjustments. The ocean around you continues its cycles, but you begin to experience them differently. Storms that you once weathered with minimal difficulty now pose serious challenges to your weakened grip strength. Temperature fluctuations affect your metabolism more dramatically, forcing longer recovery periods between hunting expeditions. Seasonal migrations of prey species become harder to follow as your reduced mobility limits your ability to track moving food sources. Predation pressure shifts as you age. Some threats that menaced your younger self become less relevant. You're now too large for many predators to handle effectively. But new dangers emerge as your slower reactions and reduced strength make you vulnerable to attackers that your prime-age self could have easily repelled. The balance of risk and reward in every decision begins to shift against you. Your sensory capabilities, once so finely tuned, begin to show signs of decline. Chemical detection becomes less acute, making it harder to track prey trails or detect approaching threats. Your tube feet lose some of their sensitivity to vibrations, reducing your awareness of environmental changes. The distributed nervous system that once coordinated your movements with perfect precision begins to develop communication delays and processing errors. Despite these challenges, you continue to survive and even thrive within your reduced capabilities. Your vast experience compensates for declining physical abilities. You know your territory so intimately that you can navigate effectively even with diminished senses. Your understanding of prey behavior patterns allows you to position yourself efficiently, reducing the energy required for successful hunts. The techniques you've developed over years of trial and error remain effective even as your execution becomes less precise. You've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate when a mussel bed is reaching peak vulnerability, when sea urchin populations are stressed and easier to capture, when environmental conditions favor particular hunting strategies. This accumulated knowledge represents a form of wisdom that younger, stronger starfish lack. Your role in the ecosystem has evolved from pure predator to something more complex. You've become a keeper of territory, a stabilizing influence that prevents rapid population fluctuations in your area. Your predictable hunting patterns and territorial boundaries create a framework within which other species can establish their own survival strategies. Younger starfish sometimes follow you, apparently learning from your techniques and territorial choices. Whether this represents true teaching behavior or simple imitation is unclear, but the effect is the same. Knowledge passes from experienced individuals to novices, helping maintain the sophisticated hunting and survival strategies that characterize your species. Your continued presence also influences the behavior of prey species in subtle but important ways. Mussel populations in your territory show different distribution patterns than those in areas without established starfish predators. Sea urchins modify their feeding behavior and habitat choices based on the chemical signals you continuously release. Even mobile prey like crabs adjust their movement patterns to avoid your known hunting zones. The spawning aggregations you participate in have changed character as you've aged. You're now one of the older, more experienced individuals whose spawning behavior helps coordinate the timing for younger participants. Your chemical signals carry information about environmental conditions and optimal timing that less experienced starfish rely on for successful reproduction. But each spawning event becomes more costly, and you begin participating less frequently. Your body requires longer recovery periods between reproductive efforts, and you become more selective about the environmental conditions that trigger your participation. This gradual withdrawal from breeding activity is another marker of your advancing age, though it happens so slowly that you adapt to each change as it occurs. The reef community around you has changed dramatically during your lifetime. Species that were common when you first settled have become rare or disappeared entirely. New species have colonized areas that were previously dominated by different communities. These changes reflect larger environmental shifts, temperature trends, current patterns, water chemistry modifications that operate on timescales much longer than individual lifespans. You've witnessed several major disturbance events that temporarily disrupted the entire ecosystem. Severe storms, disease outbreaks, pollution events, and other catastrophes have periodically reset community structures, forcing all survivors to adapt to new conditions. Your ability to survive these disruptions has depended largely on your flexibility and the regenerative capabilities that have served you throughout your life. Each recovery period following a major disturbance has been different, reflecting the complex interactions between surviving species and changing environmental conditions. You've learned to recognize the early signs of ecosystem recovery and position yourself to take advantage of new opportunities as they develop. This adaptability has been crucial to your long-term survival in an ever-changing environment. The accumulation of environmental toxins in your tissues has reached levels that noticeably affect your physiology. Your digestive efficiency has declined, forcing you to consume more prey to obtain the same nutritional benefits. Your immune system responds more slowly to infections and injuries. The regenerative processes that once quickly repaired damage now proceed at a crawl, leaving you vulnerable for extended periods. These effects are not unique to you. They represent the cumulative impact of environmental degradation on the entire starfish population in your area. Younger individuals show similar symptoms at earlier ages than previous generations, suggesting that conditions are continuing to deteriorate. Yet the species adapts, finding ways to survive even under increasingly challenging circumstances. Your individual story has become part of a larger narrative of persistence in the face of change. Every day you survive adds to the collective experience of your species, contributing to the evolutionary pressures that shape future generations. The techniques you've developed, the territories you've established, the reproductive contributions you've made all represent investments in your species' future. The ocean continues its ancient rhythms around you, indifferent to individual struggles, but providing the stage for countless stories of survival, adaptation, and persistence. Your slow-motion existence continues to unfold against this backdrop, each day bringing new challenges and new evidence of your remarkable ability to endure in one of Earth's most demanding environments. Your movements have become deliberate now, each action carefully calculated to conserve energy. The hydraulic system that once powered your tube feet with effortless precision now requires more time to pressurize and depressurize. You've learned to plan your routes more carefully, choosing paths that minimize the number of directional changes and vertical climbs that tax your aging body. The younger starfish in your territory move with the reckless confidence you once possessed. They dart between hunting grounds, chase marginal prey, and take risks that you now recognize as wasteful. Watching them triggers something that might be memory, echoes of your own youthful enthusiasm when the ocean seemed full of endless opportunities and every hunt felt like an adventure. But experience has taught you efficiency. You know which tidal cycles bring the best hunting conditions, which weather patterns stress your prey into vulnerability, which seasonal changes create temporary abundance. This knowledge allows you to time your activities perfectly, striking when success is most likely and conserving energy during less productive periods. Your relationship with pain has evolved as well. The constant ache in your older arms, the stiffness in joints that once moved fluidly, the slower healing of minor injuries, these have become background sensations that you've learned to work around. You adjust your grip strength to accommodate damaged tube feet, alter your hunting postures to favor uninjured arms, and pace your activities to prevent aggravating chronic problems. The territory you've defended for so many years has become as familiar as your own body. You know every surface texture by feel, every chemical signature by taste, every hiding spot by memory. This intimate knowledge compensates for your declining senses, allowing you to navigate effectively even when your tube feet can't detect the subtle cues they once processed effortlessly. Predators have learned to read the signs of your age as well. The crabs that once gave you a wide berth now approach more boldly, testing your reaction times and grip strength. Some have discovered that you can no longer maintain the crushing force that once made you invulnerable to their attacks. They probe for weaknesses, looking for damaged arms or areas where your defenses have deteriorated. But age has also brought you unexpected advantages in these confrontations. Your slower movements are more difficult to predict, and your patience often outlasts the attention span of younger, more impulsive attackers. You've learned to use your experience to manipulate predator behavior, leading them into positions where your remaining strengths can be most effective. The spawning aggregations have become bittersweet events. Your reduced reproductive output means you contribute fewer gametes to each spawning event, but your presence still helps coordinate the timing for other participants. The chemical signals you release carry decades of environmental memory, helping younger starfish time their reproductive efforts for optimal success. Recovery from spawning takes longer each year. What once required days now takes weeks, and you've noticed that your reproductive organs don't fully regenerate between cycles anymore. The tissue remains functional, but shows signs of permanent wear that accumulates with each breeding season. You've begun participating less frequently, your body making the decision to conserve resources for basic survival. The reef community continues to evolve around you, but the changes seem more dramatic now that your own rate of adaptation has slowed. New species establish themselves faster than you can adjust to their presence. Environmental shifts that you might have weathered easily in your prime now require major modifications to your survival strategies. Disease has become a constant concern. Your immune system, once capable of fighting off most infections, now struggles with pathogens that wouldn't have troubled your younger self. Wounds heal slowly and sometimes incompletely, creating permanent weak points in your defenses. You've learned to be more cautious about exposure to contaminated areas and infected individuals. The ocean's chemistry has subtly changed during your lifetime, and these modifications affect you more severely now that your physiological systems are less resilient. Water temperatures that once stimulated your metabolism now stress your aging body. Chemical pollutants that you could once process and eliminate now accumulate faster than your detoxification systems can handle them. Your feeding behavior has become increasingly specialized as your capabilities decline. You focus almost exclusively on prey that you can handle with minimal energy expenditure, weakened muscles, dying sea urchins, already injured crabs. The spectacular hunts of your prime, when you could overpower healthy, vigorous prey through sheer persistence, are now beyond your capabilities. But this specialization has made you an expert in recognizing vulnerability. You can detect the chemical signatures of stress, disease, and injury with remarkable precision. Your hunting success rate has actually improved in some ways because you no longer waste energy on impossible targets. Every hunt you attempt has been carefully evaluated and deemed achievable. The social dynamics of your territory have shifted as other aging starfish face similar challenges. Competition has decreased in some ways. None of you have the energy for prolonged territorial disputes, but increased in others as the most productive hunting grounds become more valuable relative to your reduced capabilities. You've developed relationships with some of your neighbors that might be called cooperation if starfish were capable of such complex social behavior. Certainly, There's less aggression and more tolerance of boundary crossings when the trespasser is clearly struggling. Whether this represents genuine empathy or simply the practical recognition that aged starfish pose minimal competitive threat is unclear. Your tube feet have begun to fail in predictable patterns. The ones at the tips of your arms, which endure the most stress during hunting and movement, show the first signs of permanent damage. They respond more slowly to nerve signals, grip less firmly, and sometimes fail to retract properly. You've learned to compensate by relying more heavily on the tube feet closer to your central disc. Some arms now show visible signs of multiple regeneration cycles. The tissue is functional, but slightly different in texture and color from the original growth. These scars tell the story of your survival, each one representing a predator encounter, environmental disaster, or hunting injury that you managed to overcome through your remarkable regenerative abilities. The regeneration process itself has slowed dramatically. Where you once regrew lost arms in months, the process now takes the better part of a year. The new tissue is often weaker than the original, more susceptible to injury, and less capable of the fine motor control that characterizes healthy starfish arms. But even imperfect regeneration is better than permanent disability. Your digestive system has adapted to your changing circumstances by becoming more efficient at extracting nutrients from limited food sources. You can now survive on smaller, less frequent meals than your younger self required. This adaptation has been crucial as your hunting success rate has declined and your energy requirements have decreased with reduced activity levels. The relationship between risk and reward has fundamentally shifted in your decision-making processes. Opportunities that would have been automatic choices in your prime now require careful calculation. Is the potential meal worth the energy required to obtain it? Can you afford the recovery time if the hunt goes badly? Will pursuing this prey leave you too exposed to other dangers? These calculations have become instinctive, but they represent a profound change in how you interact with your environment. You've become a creature of careful choices rather than bold actions, of calculated risks rather than confident pursuits. The ocean that once seemed full of opportunities now presents itself as a series of careful trade-offs. Your sensory world has contracted along with your physical capabilities. Chemical trails that you once followed for hundreds of meters now fade beyond detection after short distances. Vibrations that once warned you of approaching threats now go unnoticed until dangers are dangerously close. Your reactive distance, the range at which you can detect and respond to stimuli, has shrunk to a fraction of its former extent. This sensory decline has forced you to rely more heavily on predictable patterns and familiar routines. You stick to well-known routes where you're less likely to encounter unexpected dangers. You hunt in areas where prey behavior is most predictable. You time your activities to coincide with environmental conditions that minimize the chance of unpleasant surprises. The accumulated knowledge of decades has become your most valuable survival tool. You understand the seasonal cycles of your ecosystem with extraordinary precision, knowing when specific prey species become vulnerable, when predator activity increases or decreases, when environmental conditions favor particular survival strategies. This temporal knowledge allows you to position yourself advantageously even when your physical capabilities are limited. Your influence on the local ecosystem has evolved from direct predation pressure to something more subtle but equally important. The areas where you hunt consistently show different community structures than similar habitats without established starfish populations. Your presence creates a stabilizing influence that prevents rapid fluctuations in prey populations. Younger starfish still occasionally follow you, apparently learning from your movements and hunting choices. Whether they're consciously imitating your techniques or simply responding to the same environmental cues you've learned to recognize is impossible to determine. But the effect is the same: knowledge and successful strategies spread through the population. The spawning aggregations you participate in have become smaller and less frequent as the local starfish population has aged. Environmental pressures have reduced recruitment of young individuals, and many of your contemporaries have died or become too weak to reproduce. The chemical coordination that once synchronized dozens of individuals now involves only a handful of aging survivors. These smaller spawning events are less likely to produce successful offspring, but they still represent hope for species continuation. Your participation, even with reduced reproductive output, adds to the genetic diversity and total gamete production that determines whether any larvae will survive to settlement. Every contribution matters when the population is stressed. Your body has begun to show signs of senescence that go beyond simple wear and tear. Cellular processes that once functioned flawlessly now operate with increasing errors. Your water vascular system develops leaks that your repair mechanisms can't fully address. Waste products accumulate faster than your excretory systems can eliminate them. These changes are subtle but cumulative. Each day brings small decrements in function that individually seem insignificant but collectively represent a gradual decline toward system failure. You adapt to each change as it occurs, but the overall trajectory is unmistakably downward. Your body is approaching the limits of its ability to maintain itself. The reef around you shows similar signs of aging and stress. Coral formations that provided habitat complexity when you were young have died and eroded away. Fish populations that once provided cleaning services have declined or disappeared. The overall biodiversity of your ecosystem has decreased, creating a simpler but less stable community structure. These ecosystem changes interact with your individual aging in complex ways. Reduced habitat complexity means fewer hiding places when you're vulnerable. Decreased biodiversity reduces the variety of food sources available when your hunting capabilities decline. The simplified ecosystem provides fewer alternatives when your primary survival strategies begin to fail. Yet you continue to persist, adapting to each new challenge with the same patience and persistence that have characterized your entire life. Your slow-motion existence continues to unfold, each day a small victory against the forces that would end your story. You remain a predator, a territory holder, a participant in the ancient cycles that govern life in the ocean. The water around you carries the same chemical messages it always has: information about food, danger, mates, and environmental conditions. Your ability to interpret these messages may have declined, but your participation in the chemical communication networks that bind the reef community together continues. You are still connected to the larger web of life that extends far beyond your individual territory. Your movements have become meditation-like in their deliberation. Each extension of a tube foot is considered, each shift in position calculated for maximum efficiency. You've learned to find satisfaction in small successes, a successful capture of weak prey, a safe passage across dangerous terrain, another day of survival in an increasingly challenging world. The younger starfish in your area move with the urgency you've long since abandoned. They chase opportunities you know are unlikely to succeed, expend energy on territorial displays that serve no practical purpose, and make decisions based on optimism rather than experience. Watching them is like seeing echoes of your former self, reminders of the enthusiasm and confidence that once drove your own behavior. But you've found a different kind of satisfaction in your current existence. There's peace in having survived long enough to understand the patterns that govern your world. There's contentment in knowing your territory so intimately that every surface and crevice holds familiar comfort. There's fulfillment in having contributed to the continuation of your species through multiple reproductive cycles. The ocean continues its eternal rhythms around you, indifferent to individual struggles, but providing the stage for countless stories of persistence and adaptation. Your story is one among millions, but it's uniquely yours, a testament to the power of patience, the value of experience, and the remarkable resilience of life in even the most challenging environments. Each dawn brings new possibilities within the constraints of your aging body. Each tide cycle offers fresh opportunities to apply the wisdom you've accumulated. Each seasonal change presents familiar challenges that you've learned to navigate through decades of experience. Your life continues to right itself, one careful movement at a time. The substrate beneath you holds the chemical signatures of countless other starfish who have lived and died in this territory over the centuries. You've added your own markers to this historical record, leaving traces that will persist long after your individual story ends. Your presence has become part of the geological and chemical memory of this place. Other creatures in your ecosystem have learned to read the signs of your presence and condition. They know when you're hunting successfully and when you're struggling. They understand your movement patterns and territorial boundaries. They've incorporated your behavior into their own survival strategies, creating a web of interdependence that extends far beyond simple predator-prey relationships. Your influence on the local environment will outlast your individual life. The prey populations you've shaped through decades of selective predation carry the genetic and behavioral legacy of your hunting pressure. The territorial boundaries you've established have created patterns of resource use that other species rely on. The spawning sites you've helped select and defend will continue to serve future generations. The techniques you've developed for surviving in this particular patch of ocean represent a form of cultural knowledge that may be passed on to other starfish through chemical communication and behavioral observation. Your individual innovations in hunting, territory defense, and environmental adaptation contribute to the collective wisdom of your species. As your story continues to unfold in slow motion, it remains connected to the larger narrative of life in the ocean. Every challenge you overcome, every adaptation you make, every day you survive, adds to the accumulated experience that shapes how starfish interact with their environment. Your individual persistence contributes to the species-level resilience that has allowed starfish to thrive for millions of years. The current carries away the chemical traces of your passing, but it also brings new information from distant parts of the reef. Environmental conditions, prey availability, predator activity, reproductive opportunities, all of this data flows through the water in molecular form, creating a communication network that spans vast distances. You remain connected to events and conditions far beyond your immediate territory. Your aging body has become a library of environmental history, carrying in its tissues the chemical signatures of decades of changing ocean conditions. The pollutants you've accumulated, the isotopes you've incorporated, the cellular damage you've sustained, all of these represent a record of environmental change that scientists could read if they knew how to interpret the data. But your value extends far beyond your role as an environmental indicator. You remain an active participant in the ecosystem, a predator whose hunting activities continue to shape community structure, a competitor whose territorial behavior influences resource distribution, a reproductive individual whose genetic contributions help maintain species diversity. The ocean that surrounds you has remained remarkably constant in its fundamental characteristics throughout your lifetime, even as specific conditions have fluctuated. The basic chemistry that supports life, the physical properties that govern movement and feeding, the biological processes that drive ecosystem function. These persist across timescales much longer than individual lifespans. Your story unfolds within this context of constancy and change, individual adaptation within species-level stability, personal struggle within ecosystem-level resilience. Each day brings new evidence of your remarkable ability to persist in the face of challenges that would quickly overcome less adaptable creatures. Your slow-motion existence continues to demonstrate the power of patience, persistence, and evolutionary refinement. The reef community around you pulses with activity that you experience as a complex symphony of chemical signals, pressure waves, and substrate vibrations. Your reduced sensory capabilities mean you perceive only a fraction of this information, but what you do detect carries the accumulated meaning of decades of experience. Every signal has context, every change has precedent, every challenge has been faced before. Your territory has become a small kingdom where you rule through knowledge rather than force, influence rather than dominance, persistence rather than aggression. The boundaries you've established are respected not because you can enforce them, but because your presence has created a stable framework that benefits the entire local community. The younger starfish, who occasionally venture into your domain, quickly learn the unspoken rules that govern this space. They discover the hunting grounds that are most productive, the hiding spots that offer the best protection, the routes that minimize energy expenditure and exposure to danger. Your territory serves as a training ground where inexperienced individuals can learn the skills they'll need to establish their own domains. As the seasons continue their endless cycle, you remain a constant presence in an ever-changing environment. Your persistence through multiple climate cycles, population fluctuations, and community reorganizations makes you a stabilizing force that helps maintain ecosystem continuity. Your individual survival contributes to the larger pattern of persistence that characterizes successful ecosystems. The chemical messages you release continue to carry information about environmental conditions, resource availability, and territorial boundaries. Other starfish throughout the area incorporate this data into their own decision-making processes, creating a distributed intelligence network that helps coordinate community-wide responses to changing conditions. Your story continues to unfold with the same patience and persistence that have characterized every aspect of your existence. Each movement of your tube feet writes another line in the narrative of survival, adaptation, and resilience that defines life in the ocean's depths. The next chapter of your remarkable journey awaits, filled with the same possibilities and challenges that have shaped your path from the very beginning. The ocean floor beneath you has become a living map of memory, each texture and contour holding decades of accumulated knowledge. Your tube feet read these surfaces like Braille, detecting changes so subtle that younger starfish would miss them entirely. A shift in bacterial growth patterns warns of changing water chemistry. An unusual accumulation of sediment suggests altered current flows. These signs mean nothing to inexperienced eyes, but they tell you stories about environmental changes that could affect your survival. Your digestive system has adapted to extract maximum nutrition from increasingly scarce resources. The enzymes you produce have become more concentrated, more efficient at breaking down the tough shells and resistant proteins that make up your diet. Your stomach can now remain extended for longer periods without losing effectiveness, allowing you to digest meals that would have been impossible to process in your youth. But this efficiency comes at a cost. Your body now requires specific nutrients that were once optional, minerals and compounds that support your aging organ systems. Finding prey that contains these essential elements has become a priority that sometimes overrides other considerations. You'll pass up easier meals to pursue more nutritionally complete targets, even when the energy expenditure seems disproportionate. The water column above you carries different information now than it did in your youth. Fish populations have shifted, bringing new predator pressures and removing familiar threats. Plankton communities have changed composition, altering the base of the food web in ways that ripple up through every trophic level. Even the microscopic organisms that decompose organic matter have evolved, changing the chemical signatures that help you navigate your world. These changes force constant adaptation in your hunting strategies. Prey species that once followed predictable patterns now behave differently, responding to new predator pressures and altered environmental conditions. You've had to modify techniques that worked successfully for years, developing new approaches that account for these behavioral shifts. Your relationship with other aging starfish in the area has evolved into something resembling cooperation, though whether this represents true social behavior or simply parallel responses to similar challenges remains unclear. You no longer compete aggressively for territory when boundaries overlap. Instead, you seem to recognize that the energy required for territorial disputes is better invested in hunting and survival. This tolerance has created overlapping zones where multiple starfish hunt without conflict, sharing resources in ways that would have been impossible during your territorial prime. These arrangements appear to benefit everyone involved, allowing more efficient coverage of hunting grounds and better detection of environmental threats. The spawning aggregations you participate in have taken on increased significance as the local population ages. Each reproductive event might be the last for some participants, making every genetic contribution precious. The chemical coordination required for successful spawning has become more complex, as fewer individuals means less redundancy in the communication networks that synchronize these events. Your own reproductive output has declined dramatically, but your participation still provides crucial coordination signals that help younger starfish time their contributions effectively. The pheromones you release carry environmental information gathered over decades, helping the entire aggregation choose optimal conditions for gamete release. Recovery from spawning now requires most of your annual energy budget. What once took days of recuperation now demands weeks of careful resource management. Your body prioritizes basic survival functions over tissue repair, leaving you vulnerable for extended periods after each reproductive effort. Yet you continue to participate because the drive to reproduce remains strong even as your capabilities diminish. The reef community has learned to read the signs of your condition with remarkable precision. Cleaner fish approach more boldly when they sense weakness, sometimes becoming aggressive enough to damage healthy tissue in their eagerness to feed. Crabs test your grip strength more frequently, probing for opportunities to scavenge from your catches or even attack you directly. But some relationships have become more supportive. Certain fish species have learned that following your hunting activities can lead them to disturbed sediments rich in small prey. They hover nearby when you hunt, waiting for the clouds of debris that your feeding activities create. This association provides them with food while giving you early warning of approaching threats. Your sensory decline has forced you to rely more heavily on environmental cues that remain detectable. Changes in water pressure that indicate approaching storms, chemical gradients that reveal distant food sources, substrate vibrations that warn of geological instability. These broader signals help compensate for your reduced ability to detect immediate threats and opportunities. The territory you've defended for so many years has begun to show signs of your long occupancy. Prey populations in heavily hunted areas have evolved behavioral adaptations that make them more difficult to catch. Mussels in your core territory close their shells more quickly when they detect your approach. Sea urchins cluster in defensive formations when your chemical signature indicates hunting activity. These evolutionary responses represent a form of arms race between predator and prey that plays out over multiple generations. Your hunting pressure has shaped the behavior and even the genetics of local prey populations, creating a co-evolutionary dynamic that extends far beyond individual interactions. Environmental toxins have reached concentrations in your tissues that affect your basic physiological processes. Heavy metals interfere with nerve transmission, slowing your already deliberate movements. Organic pollutants disrupt hormone production, affecting everything from digestion to regeneration. Plastic microparticles clog your filtering systems, reducing your ability to process nutrients and eliminate waste. These effects accumulate slowly, often masked by the normal aging process until they reach critical thresholds. A hunting technique that works successfully for years suddenly becomes unreliable. A regenerating arm stops growing partway through the process. A familiar prey species becomes impossible to digest efficiently. The changes seem sudden, but they represent the culmination of decades of gradual poisoning. Your immune system, once capable of fighting off most pathogens, now struggles with infections that would have been minor inconveniences in your prime. Bacterial invasions that once cleared up in days now persist for weeks, draining energy reserves and leaving you vulnerable to secondary infections. Viral outbreaks that sweep through the starfish population affect you more severely and for longer periods. But your accumulated resistance to local pathogens provides some protection against diseases that devastate younger individuals. Your immune system carries the memory of decades of exposure, allowing you to survive some epidemics that kill less experienced starfish. This immunity makes you a reservoir of genetic resistance that could help the population recover from disease outbreaks. The ocean's chemistry continues to change around you, driven by factors operating on scales far larger than your individual territory. Ocean acidification affects the shell-building ability of your prey, making some species more vulnerable while strengthening others. Temperature change alter current patterns, bringing new species into your area while driving familiar ones away. These large-scale changes interact with your individual aging in unpredictable ways. Some modifications to ocean chemistry actually benefit your current condition, while others exacerbate the challenges you already face. Your ability to adapt to these changes has been crucial to your continued survival, but each adaptation requires energy and resilience that you have in decreasing supply. Your movement patterns have become increasingly ritualistic, following routes and schedules that maximize efficiency while minimizing risk. You hunt in the same areas at the same times, following paths that avoid known dangers and capitalize on predictable opportunities. This behavioral rigidity might seem limiting, but it represents the optimization of limited resources for maximum survival benefit. Younger starfish sometimes follow these established routes, learning from your decades of experience about the safest and most productive ways to navigate the territory. Whether they understand the reasoning behind your choices or simply recognize successful patterns is unclear, but the knowledge transfer helps maintain continuity in local starfish populations. Your feeding behavior has become increasingly specialized as your capabilities narrow. You focus almost exclusively on prey that you can handle with minimal energy expenditure and maximum nutritional return. This specialization has made you an expert in recognizing vulnerability and timing attacks for optimal success, but it has also made you dependent on specific prey types that might not always be available. The chemical communication networks that connect starfish across wide areas of the reef have adapted to your changing condition. Your scent markers now carry information about age and experience, as well as territorial claims and reproductive status. Other starfish interpret these signals differently than they would similar messages from younger individuals, showing more tolerance for territorial boundary crossings and less aggressive responses to competitive encounters. Your regenerative abilities, once remarkable for their speed and completeness, now operate at a fraction of their former efficiency. Lost arms regrow slowly and often incompletely, resulting in appendages that are functional but visibly different from the originals. Multiple regeneration events have left some arms shorter and weaker than others, creating asymmetries that affect your movement and hunting capabilities. But even imperfect regeneration represents a remarkable biological capability that few other creatures possess. Your ability to survive injuries that would be fatal to most animals continues to serve you well, even as the recovery process becomes more costly and time-consuming. Each successful regeneration is a victory against the forces that would end your story. The substrate beneath you tells the history of your long occupancy through chemical deposits and physical modifications. Areas where you've hunted repeatedly show different bacterial communities than similar nearby habitats. Surfaces you've gripped thousands of times bear microscopic wear patterns that affect water flow and sediment deposition. Your presence has literally changed the physical characteristics of your environment. These modifications create feedback loops that affect your current survival strategies. Changed water flow patterns influence where prey species settle and how nutrients distribute. Altered bacterial communities affect the chemical signals that help you navigate and hunt. The environment you've shaped through decades of activity now shapes your behavior in return. Your relationship with the tidal cycles has deepened through years of observation and experience. You can predict not just the timing of high and low tides, but the subtle variations in current strength, temperature, and chemistry that accompany different tidal conditions. This knowledge allows you to position yourself optimally for hunting, reproduction, and predator avoidance. The lunar cycles that drive these tidal patterns have become as familiar as your own biological rhythms. You can sense the approach of spring tides that bring stronger currents and better hunting opportunities. You recognize the neap tide conditions that favor different prey species and require modified hunting strategies. This temporal knowledge represents one of your most valuable survival assets. Your influence on the local ecosystem has evolved from direct predation pressure to something more subtle but equally important. The areas where you hunt show different species compositions and age structures than similar habitats without established starfish populations. Your presence creates stability that allows other species to develop predictable life history strategies. Juvenile fish learn to recognize your hunting patterns and use them as navigational aids. Crabs time their molting cycles to avoid periods when your hunting activity peaks. Even sessile organisms, like barnacles and mussels, show distribution patterns that reflect decades of predation pressure from you and other starfish in the area. The spawning sites you've helped establish and defend over multiple reproductive seasons have become traditional gathering places that attract starfish from increasingly large areas. These locations develop their own microenvironments with specific current patterns and chemical characteristics that favor successful reproduction. Your role in maintaining these sites benefits the entire local population, but the spawning aggregations themselves have become smaller and less frequent as environmental pressures reduce the breeding population. Climate change, pollution, and habitat degradation have all contributed to declining recruitment of young starfish. The reproductive events you participate in now carry increased importance as opportunities for species continuation become rarer. Your accumulated knowledge of environmental patterns has made you a living repository of ecological memory. You've experienced climate cycles, pollution events, disease outbreaks, and habitat changes that span decades. This information exists nowhere else in such complete form, making your continued survival valuable not just to yourself, but to the entire ecosystem. The chemical signals you release carry traces of this environmental history, providing other starfish with information about long-term patterns and trends. Your presence serves as a baseline against which younger individuals can measure current conditions, helping them distinguish between normal variation and genuine environmental change. Your story continues to unfold against the backdrop of an ocean in transition. Climate change, pollution, overfishing, and habitat destruction create challenges that no individual organism has faced before. Yet your species has survived previous mass extinctions and environmental catastrophes through the same qualities that have sustained you: patience, persistence, and remarkable adaptability. Each day you survive adds to the collective experience that helps starfish as a species navigate an uncertain future. Your individual adaptations to changing conditions contribute to the evolutionary pressures that shape how future generations will respond to environmental challenges. Your persistence in the face of adversity demonstrates the resilience that has made starfish successful for hundreds of millions of years. The reef community around you continues to evolve, but the fundamental processes that govern ecosystem function remain constant. Energy flows from primary producers to consumers. Nutrients cycle through living and dead components, and species interactions create the complex webs of interdependence that maintain ecological stability. Your role in these processes continues even as your individual capabilities decline. Your movements through the ecosystem create ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate actions. Every prey item you consume affects population dynamics. Every territory you defend influences resource distribution. Every spawning event you participate in contributes to genetic diversity and population continuity. Your individual life remains connected to the larger patterns that govern life in the ocean. The water that surrounds you carries the same fundamental properties it has maintained for billions of years, even as specific conditions fluctuate with environmental change. The chemical and physical characteristics that make life possible persist across timescales much longer than individual lifespans, providing the stable foundation upon which evolutionary adaptation can operate. Your existence within this ancient medium connects you to the deepest history of life on Earth. The same processes that sustained the first marine organisms continue to support your survival. The same physical laws that governed movement and feeding in prehistoric oceans still determine your daily activities. Your individual story unfolds within this vast temporal context. The substrate beneath you connects you directly to the geological processes that have shaped the ocean floor over millions of years. The rocks you grip were formed by ancient volcanic activity, sedimentation, and tectonic movement. The minerals that make up these surfaces provide the chemical foundation for the entire reef ecosystem. Your intimate knowledge of these surfaces links you to Earth's deep history. Your tube feet detect variations in rock composition that reflect different geological epochs, different climate conditions, different ocean chemistries. The limestone surfaces that provide your best hunting grounds were formed by coral reefs that lived and died millions of years before your species evolved. Your current survival depends on the legacy of these ancient ecosystems. The patterns of current and wave action that shape your daily experience reflect the interaction between ocean basins, continental masses, and atmospheric systems that operate on planetary scales. Your ability to predict and respond to these patterns connects your individual survival to the largest scale processes that govern Earth's climate and ocean circulation. Your chemical communication with other starfish participates in molecular networks that span vast distances and connect separate populations across ocean basins. The pheromones you release join the chemical symphony that coordinates reproduction, territorial behavior, and environmental responses across entire species ranges. Your individual contributions help maintain the genetic and behavioral continuity that ensures species survival. The ocean continues its eternal circulation, carrying nutrients, heat, and life throughout the global system that connects all marine ecosystems. Your small territory represents just one node in this vast network, but your participation in its processes contributes to the planetary scale systems that regulate climate, chemistry, and biological productivity. Your story remains embedded within these larger narratives: individual adaptation within species evolution, local ecosystem dynamics within global environmental change, contemporary survival within the deep history of life on Earth. Each movement of your tube feet continues to write new chapters in this ancient story, demonstrating the remarkable persistence of life in even the most challenging circumstances. The reef pulses around you with the rhythms that have governed marine ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Dawn brings increased activity as diurnal species begin their daily routines. Tidal changes redistribute nutrients and organisms across the landscape. Seasonal cycles drive migration, reproduction, and resource availability. Your life unfolds within these predictable patterns while adapting to unpredictable changes. Your individual persistence in the face of aging, environmental change, and increasing challenges represents a small but significant victory in the ongoing struggle between order and entropy that drives all biological systems. Every day you survive defies the forces that would reduce you to component molecules and return your atoms to the inorganic environment from which they came. Yet your eventual return to that inorganic state will itself contribute to the cycles that support future life. The calcium in your skeleton will strengthen the shells of future mollusks. The organic compounds in your tissues will fuel bacterial communities that form the base of marine food webs. Even in death, your individual atoms will continue to participate in the processes that maintain life in the ocean. Your story continues to unfold with the same deliberate pace that has characterized every aspect of your existence. Each day brings new evidence of your remarkable ability to persist, adapt, and thrive within the constraints of an aging body and a changing environment. The next chapter awaits, filled with the same mixture of challenges and opportunities that have shaped your extraordinary journey from microscopic larva to apex predator of the reef. The ancient rhythms that govern your world remain constant, even as specific conditions continue to evolve. Your participation in these rhythms connects you to the deepest patterns of life on Earth, while your individual adaptations help your species navigate an uncertain future. Your slow-motion existence continues to demonstrate that persistence, patience, and adaptability remain the most powerful tools for survival in an ever-changing world. The years have accumulated like sediment layers on the ocean floor, each one adding weight to your existence while slowly wearing away at your capabilities. Your movements now require conscious planning in ways they never did before. What was once fluid motion has become a series of deliberate decisions: which tube feet to engage, how much pressure to apply, whether the energy cost justifies the intended action. Your territory has contracted to a fraction of its former size, but your knowledge of this smaller domain has become encyclopedic. Every crevice holds memories of successful hunts. Every surface bears the chemical signature of your long occupation. You can navigate this familiar landscape even when your senses fail, guided by decades of accumulated experience that younger starfish cannot match. The reef community has learned to interpret the signs of your condition with remarkable precision. Cleaner fish approach more boldly when they sense your weakness, sometimes becoming aggressive in their feeding. Crabs test your grip strength regularly, probing for opportunities to scavenge or attack. But some relationships have deepened into what might be called mutual benefit. Certain fish follow your slow progress, feeding on the small creatures your movement disturbs. Your hunting strategies have evolved to match your declining capabilities. Where you once overpowered healthy prey through sheer persistence, you now focus exclusively on the weak, injured, and dying. Your ability to detect vulnerability has become supernatural in its precision. You can identify a stressed muscle from chemical traces so faint that younger starfish would miss them entirely. The spawning aggregations have become bittersweet gatherings of aging survivors. Each reproductive event might be your last, making every genetic contribution precious. Your reduced output means you contribute fewer gametes, but your presence still provides crucial coordination signals that help synchronize the entire group. The pheromones you release carry environmental wisdom gathered over decades. Recovery from spawning now consumes most of your annual energy budget. What once required days of recuperation now demands weeks of careful resource management. Your body prioritizes basic survival over tissue repair, leaving you vulnerable for extended periods. Yet the drive to reproduce remains strong, compelling you to participate despite the mounting costs. Environmental toxins have reached concentrations in your tissues that affect basic physiological processes. Heavy metals slow your nerve transmission, making your already deliberate movements even more sluggish. Organic pollutants disrupt your hormone production, affecting everything from digestion to regeneration. The ocean that once sustained you now carries poisons that accumulate faster than your aging systems can eliminate them. Your immune system struggles with infections that would have been minor inconveniences in your prime. Bacterial invasions persist for weeks, draining energy reserves you can ill afford to lose. But your accumulated resistance to local pathogens provides some protection. You survive some disease outbreaks that devastate younger individuals, making you a reservoir of genetic immunity. The water chemistry around you has shifted subtly but significantly during your lifetime. Ocean acidification affects your prey's ability to build shells, making some species more vulnerable while strengthening others. Temperature changes alter current patterns, bringing unfamiliar species into your territory while driving away longtime neighbors. Each change requires adaptations that tax your diminishing flexibility. Your regenerative abilities operate at a fraction of their former efficiency. Lost arms regrow slowly and often incompletely, resulting in asymmetrical appendages that affect your movement and hunting. Multiple regeneration cycles have left visible scars, arms of different lengths and textures that tell the story of your survival through decades of predation attempts and environmental disasters. But even imperfect regeneration represents a biological marvel that sustains you through injuries that would kill most creatures. Each successful regrowth is a victory against entropy, proof that your ancient lineage's evolutionary innovations remain effective even under modern environmental pressures. Your relationship with time has fundamentally altered. The urgent rhythms that once drove your behavior have slowed to match your reduced capabilities. You measure opportunities in weeks rather than days, plan movements across seasons rather than tides. This temporal expansion allows you to perceive patterns that faster-moving creatures miss entirely. The substrate beneath you holds the accumulated history of your long residence. Chemical deposits from decades of hunting mark your most productive areas. Microscopic wear patterns from countless tube-foot contacts alter local water flow. Your presence has literally reshaped the physical environment, creating feedback loops that continue to influence your survival strategies. Young starfish occasionally venture into your domain, their movements betraying the reckless confidence you once possessed. They chase marginal opportunities you now recognize as energy wasting, engage in territorial displays that serve no practical purpose, make decisions based on optimism rather than experience. Watching them triggers something resembling memory, echoes of your own youthful enthusiasm. Your sensory world has contracted dramatically. Chemical trails fade beyond detection after short distances. Vibrations that once warned of approaching threats now go unnoticed until dangers are perilously close. Your reactive distance has shrunk to a fraction of its former range, forcing you to rely on predictable patterns and familiar routines. The spawning sites you've helped establish over multiple reproductive seasons have become traditional gathering places that attract starfish from increasingly distant territories. These locations develop their own microenvironments with specific current patterns and chemical characteristics that favor successful reproduction. Your role in maintaining these sites benefits the entire regional population, but the aggregations themselves grow smaller each year as environmental pressures reduce the breeding population. Climate change, pollution, and habitat degradation have all contributed to declining recruitment. The reproductive events you participate in carry increased significance as opportunities for species continuation become rarer. Your accumulated knowledge has made you a living repository of ecological memory. You've witnessed climate cycles, pollution events, disease outbreaks, and habitat changes that span decades. This information exists in no other form, making your continued survival valuable to the entire ecosystem's stability and resilience. The chemical signals you release carry traces of this environmental history, providing younger starfish with baseline data about long-term patterns and trends. Your presence serves as a reference point against which others can measure current conditions, helping distinguish between normal variation and genuine environmental change. Other aging starfish in your area show similar patterns of decline, suggesting population-wide effects rather than individual health issues. You've all adapted to new baselines of performance, with younger individuals never knowing that conditions were once more favorable. This generational shift in expectations masks the true extent of environmental degradation. Your feeding behavior has become ritualistic in its precision. You hunt in the same locations at optimal times, following paths that maximize efficiency while minimizing risk. This apparent rigidity actually represents sophisticated optimization, the distillation of decades of experience into survival strategies that work within your current limitations. The reef community has incorporated your predictable patterns into their own survival strategies. Juvenile fish use your hunting routes as navigational guides. Crabs time their activities to avoid your peak feeding periods. Even sessile organisms show distribution patterns that reflect your long-term predation pressure. Your influence extends beyond direct predation to ecosystem engineering effects that persist across multiple generations. The areas you've hunted repeatedly show different species compositions than similar habitats without established starfish. Your presence creates stability that allows other species to develop reliable life history strategies. The ocean's fundamental chemistry remains constant despite fluctuating conditions, providing the stable foundation that has supported marine life for billions of years. Your existence within this ancient medium connects you to the deepest history of life on Earth. The same processes that sustain prehistoric organisms continue to support your survival. Your individual adaptations contribute to the evolutionary pressures shaping how future starfish generations will respond to environmental challenges. Every successful technique you develop, every survival strategy you employ, adds to the collective experience that guides species-level evolution. The tidal cycles that govern your daily existence reflect planetary-scale processes, the gravitational dance between Earth, Moon, and Sun that has driven ocean rhythms for geological ages. Your ability to predict and respond to these patterns connects your individual survival to cosmic forces operating far beyond your small territory. Your tube feet detect geological variations that span millions of years of Earth history. The limestone surfaces providing your best hunting grounds were formed by ancient coral reefs that lived and died eons before your species evolved. Your current survival depends on the legacy of these prehistoric ecosystems. The chemical communication networks you participate in span vast oceanic distances, connecting separate populations across entire ocean basins. Your individual contributions help maintain the genetic and behavioral continuity that ensures species survival on a planetary scale. Your story remains embedded within larger narratives of persistence and adaptation, individual survival within species evolution, local ecosystem dynamics within global environmental change, contemporary challenges within the deep history of life on Earth. Each movement continues to write new chapters in this ancient story. The reef pulses with rhythms that have governed marine ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Your life unfolds within these predictable patterns while constantly adapting to unpredictable changes. Your persistence demonstrates that patience and adaptability remain the most powerful survival tools in an ever-changing world. Your eventual return to inorganic components will itself contribute to the cycles supporting future life. The minerals in your skeleton will strengthen tomorrow's shell builders. The organic compounds in your tissues will fuel bacterial communities, forming the base of marine food webs. Even in death, your atoms will continue participating in the processes that maintain oceanic life, but that eventual ending remains distant. For now, your story continues with the same deliberate pace that has characterized your entire existence. Each day brings fresh evidence of your remarkable ability to persist, adapt, and thrive within an aging body's constraints and a changing environment's challenges. The ancient ocean continues its eternal circulation, carrying nutrients, heat, and life throughout the global system that connects all marine ecosystems. Your small territory represents just one node in this vast network, but your participation contributes to planetary-scale systems regulating climate, chemistry, and biological productivity. Your individual persistence against aging, environmental change, and mounting challenges represents a small but significant victory in the ongoing struggle between order and entropy that drives all biological systems. Every day you survive defies the forces attempting to reduce you to component molecules. The substrate connecting you to geological deep time reflects volcanic activity, sedimentation, and tectonic movement spanning millions of years. Your intimate knowledge of these surfaces links you to Earth's deepest history while providing the foundation for your continued survival in an uncertain present. Your movements through the ecosystem create ripple effects extending far beyond immediate actions. Every prey consumed affects population dynamics. Every territory defended influences resource distribution. Every spawning event contributes to genetic diversity and population continuity. Your individual life remains connected to larger patterns governing oceanic existence. The water surrounding you maintains the same fundamental properties it has held for billions of years, even as specific conditions fluctuate with environmental change. The chemical and physical characteristics making life possible persist across timescales much longer than individual lifespans, providing stability upon which evolutionary adaptation operates. Your chemical communication with other starfish participates in molecular networks spanning ocean basins and connecting populations across species ranges. The compounds you release join the chemical symphony coordinating reproduction, territorial behavior, and environmental responses throughout your species' global distribution. Your accumulated resistance to local pathogens makes you a genetic repository that could help populations recover from disease outbreaks. Your immune system carries decades of exposure memory, allowing survival of epidemics that devastate less experienced individuals. This biological knowledge becomes increasingly valuable as environmental stresses weaken overall population immunity. The current patterns shaping your daily experience reflect interactions between ocean basins, continental masses, and atmospheric systems operating on planetary scales. Your ability to predict and respond to these patterns connects individual survival to the largest processes governing Earth's climate and ocean circulation. Your territory's contraction has intensified your knowledge of the remaining domain. What you've lost in range, you've gained in intimate understanding. Every surface texture, every chemical gradient, every hiding spot exists in perfect detail within your distributed nervous system. This concentrated wisdom compensates for declining sensory acuity. The environmental changes you've witnessed span multiple climate cycles, providing perspective that no younger organism possesses. Your survival through various oceanographic shifts, temperature fluctuations, and chemical alterations makes you a living archive of adaptation strategies that prove successful under diverse conditions. Your hunting success rate has actually improved in some ways, despite declining physical capabilities. Your specialization in vulnerable prey means you rarely waste energy on impossible targets. Every hunt you attempt has been carefully evaluated and deemed achievable based on decades of accumulated judgment. The social dynamics among aging starfish in your area have evolved beyond simple territorial competition towards something resembling tolerance or even cooperation. Energy conservation has become more important than aggressive boundary defense, creating overlapping zones where multiple individuals hunt without conflict. Your participation in spawning events now carries disproportionate importance due to the coordination role you provide. Younger starfish rely on the environmental information encoded in your chemical signals to time their reproductive efforts optimally. Your presence helps synchronize events that might otherwise fail due to poor coordination. The regenerative processes that once quickly repaired damage now proceed at a pace that requires fundamental changes in risk assessment. Injuries that would have been minor setbacks in your prime now represent potentially fatal vulnerabilities that must be avoided at all costs. Your behavior has become increasingly conservative as healing capacity declines. Your digestive system has adapted to extract maximum nutrition from limited resources through increased enzyme efficiency and extended processing times. You can now survive on smaller, less frequent meals than your younger self required, though the energy content must be higher quality to meet your specialized needs. The reef community's response to your aging has created new ecological relationships that didn't exist when you were in your territorial prime. Some species have learned to exploit your reduced mobility and reaction time, while others have developed protective associations that benefit both parties in the changing ecosystem. Your influence on local evolutionary pressures continues even as your direct predation impact declines. The prey species in your territory show behavioral and genetic adaptations that reflect decades of selection pressure from your hunting activities. These evolutionary changes will persist long after your individual story ends. The chemical landscape of your environment has been permanently altered by your long residence. Metabolic byproducts, pheromone deposits, and territorial markers have created a unique signature that influences settlement patterns, feeding behaviors, and reproductive success of numerous species in your area. Your story continues to demonstrate that survival in challenging environments depends less on raw physical capability than on accumulated wisdom, adaptive flexibility, and the patience to wait for favorable conditions. These qualities have served your species well through millions of years of environmental change. The ocean's eternal rhythms provide continuity even as specific conditions evolve around you. Tidal cycles, seasonal changes, and lunar patterns maintain their ancient cadence, offering predictable structure within which you can optimize your increasingly limited capabilities for maximum survival benefit. Your individual journey from microscopic larva to aged predator represents one successful navigation of the challenges that face every member of your species. The techniques you've developed, the knowledge you've accumulated, and the adaptations you've made all contribute to the collective wisdom that helps starfish persist through environmental uncertainty. Each dawn continues to bring new possibilities within your current constraints. Each tidal cycle offers fresh opportunities to apply hard-won wisdom. Each seasonal change presents familiar challenges that you've learned to navigate through decades of experience. Your remarkable journey continues, one deliberate movement at a time. The morning light filters down through the water column, weaker now than when you first settled on this reef decades ago. Your tube feet move with the measured precision of extreme age, each placement calculated to conserve what little energy remains. The vibrant territory you once dominated has shrunk to a small patch of familiar rocks, but your knowledge of this tiny domain has become absolute. Your digestive system struggles to process even the softest prey. What once took hours now requires days of external digestion. Your stomach extended for so long that you become vulnerable to attacks you could once easily repel. The enzymes that served you faithfully for years have lost their potency, forcing you to be increasingly selective about what you attempt to consume. A young crab ventures too close, its movements quick and confident. In your prime, this would have been an easy meal. Your arms could have surrounded it before it knew the danger. Now you can only watch as it scuttles past, your reaction time too slow, your grip too weak to pose any real threat. The crab seems to sense this, showing none of the caution its ancestors learned to display around starfish. Your water vascular system has developed irreparable leaks. The hydraulic pressure that once powered your tube feet with mechanical precision now dissipates through microscopic failures in your internal plumbing. Moving even short distances requires rest periods that grow longer each day. Sometimes you remain motionless for hours, not hunting or hiding, just existing in a state of minimal energy expenditure. The chemical signals you release have changed, carrying new information that other starfish interpret as weakness. Younger individuals venture into what was once your exclusive territory, testing boundaries you can no longer enforce. Some show a strange deference, as if recognizing your age and experience, but others simply ignore your presence entirely. Your arms bear the accumulated scars of countless regeneration cycles. 3 of them are noticeably shorter than the others, the result of injuries that your aging body couldn't fully repair. Though asymmetry affects your movement patterns, forcing you to compensate with techniques that require more energy than you can spare, each step becomes a negotiation between intention and capability. A familiar vibration reaches you through the substrate, another starfish approaching from the eastern boundary of your territory. Your chemical receptors identify it as one of your longtime neighbors, an individual almost as old as yourself. Its movements carry the same deliberate quality as your own, the same careful conservation of limited resources. The 2 of you meet near a cluster of aging mussels, neither showing aggression nor territorial display. In your younger days, such an encounter would have resulted in chemical posturing and boundary negotiations. Now you simply coexist, 2 ancient predators sharing space that neither has the strength to defend exclusively. There's something almost peaceful in this tolerance born of mutual exhaustion. The mussel bed between you represents a prize that neither can claim alone. The shellfish have grown old and tough, their shells thick from years of defensive calcification. Opening them would require the sustained pressure that your failing hydraulic systems can no longer maintain, yet hunger drives you both toward this inadequate feast. Your neighbor positions itself on one side of a particularly large mussel while you approach from the other. Without any apparent communication, you both begin applying pressure to the shell. It's a collaboration born of necessity rather than intelligence, but it works. The combined force of your weakened grips slowly overcomes the mollusk's resistance. The shell opens with agonizing slowness, revealing the soft tissue within. Your neighbor's stomach emerges first, beginning the external digestion that will make this meal possible. You wait your turn with patience, learned from decades of similar encounters. There's enough for both of you, barely, and sharing requires less energy than fighting. As you feed, your movements become even more labored. The effort of maintaining position while digesting taxes your failing systems to their limits. Your tube feet lose their grip periodically, forcing you to reposition with movements that send tremors of exhaustion through your distributed nervous system. Each bite of nutrition comes at a cost that grows higher with every meal. The spawning season approaches, marked by subtle changes in water temperature and current patterns that your experienced body recognizes despite your sensory decline. Also, your reproductive organs, such as they are, respond to these cues with feeble stirrings of biological imperative, but your body lacks the energy reserves to produce viable gametes in meaningful quantities. Other starfish in the area begin their migration toward traditional spawning grounds, following chemical trails that grows stronger as more individuals join the gathering. You sense their passage through vibrations in the substrate and changes in local water chemistry. Part of you responds to these signals with ancient instincts that predate conscious thought, but when you attempt to follow, your body rebels. The journey that once seemed trivial now represents an impossible expenditure of energy. Your tube feet extend and retract with mechanical difficulty, each step a monumental effort that brings you only centimeters closer to your goal. After an hour of struggle, you've barely moved beyond your usual territory. The realization settles over you gradually. This spawning season will proceed without your participation. Your reproductive life, which began so many years ago with those first tentative releases of gametes, has reached its natural end. The genetic contributions you've made over decades of breeding cycles represent your legacy to future generations. You abandon the journey and return to your familiar rocks, movements even more labored than before. The failed attempt has depleted reserves you couldn't afford to lose. Your body prioritizes basic survival functions, shutting down non-essential processes to conserve what little energy remains. Even your limited mobility becomes more restricted as systems begin failing in cascade fashion. Days pass in a haze of minimal activity. You remain in the same position for hours at a time, your tube feet barely maintaining their grip on the substrate. Small fish that once fled from your presence now investigate you with curious boldness, some even brushing against your arms without triggering any defensive response. Your threat level has diminished to near zero. A cleaner fish approaches, its movements tentative but increasingly confident. It begins picking at your surface, removing parasites and dead tissue with mechanical efficiency. Normally, you would regulate this relationship, allowing beneficial cleaning while preventing tissue damage. Now you lack the energy to respond, becoming a passive recipient of whatever attention the cleaner chooses to provide. The fish grows bolder, its feeding more aggressive as it realizes your inability to resist. What began as mutualistic cleaning becomes exploitative grazing on healthy tissue. Small wounds open where its rasping mouth removes too much material. Your immune system attempts to respond, but the cellular defenders move sluggishly through your failing circulation. Night falls with unusual significance. Your metabolism, already operating at minimal levels, slows further in the absence of solar energy filtering through the water column. The temperature drops just enough to stress your compromised physiological systems beyond their adaptive capacity. Chemical processes that once functioned automatically now struggle to maintain basic cellular integrity. Your distributed nervous system begins losing coordination between distant body parts. Commands from your central disk arrive at your arm tips with increasing delays, if at all. The seamless integration that once characterized Starfish motor control fragments into isolated responses from individual body segments. Your arms begin acting somewhat independently, each responding to local stimuli without reference to overall behavioral coordination. A small crab approaches during the night, its claws testing your responsiveness with gentle prods. Your arms fail to react with their usual defensive withdrawal. The crab grows bolder, climbing onto your central disk and exploring your surface with its manipulator appendages. It's searching for soft spots, testing whether you represent a feeding opportunity rather than a threat. The crab's investigation triggers your most primitive defensive responses, but even these operate with fatal delays. By the time your arms begin their sluggish withdrawal, the crab has already identified and attacked vulnerable areas where your exoskeleton shows signs of deterioration. Sharp claws penetrate deeper than your failing repair mechanisms can address. Pain, or whatever passes for pain in your distributed nervous system flares through your body as the crab begins feeding on your living tissue. Your movements become uncoordinated thrashing that accomplishes nothing beyond attracting additional scavengers. The chemical signals released by your damaged tissues advertise weakness to every opportunistic feeder in the area. More crabs arrive, drawn by the scent of easy prey. They approach with the confidence of predators who have identified a helpless victim. Your legendary defensive capabilities have degraded to the point where creatures that once feared you now see you as just another food source. The balance of power that defined your relationships for decades has shifted decisively against you. Your attempts at escape produce only feeble movements that carry you mere centimeters from your attackers. The hydraulic system that once powered impressive locomotion now barely functions, generating insufficient pressure to extend your tube feed with any meaningful force. You're trapped by your own body's failure to maintain the basic functions that kept you alive for so many years. The feeding frenzy intensifies as more scavengers detect the chemical signals of your distress. Fish that normally avoid the seafloor descend to investigate the unusual activity. Worms emerge from their burrows to participate in the unexpected feast. Your individual tragedy becomes a windfall for the entire local community of opportunistic feeders. But even as your body fails, your tissue continues to nourish the ecosystem that sustained you throughout your life. The proteins and minerals that built your remarkable form will be recycled into new life, distributed through food webs that extend far beyond your immediate vicinity. Your atoms will become part of algae, bacteria, fish, and eventually other starfish, continuing the ancient cycles of death and renewal. Your consciousness, such as it was in your distributed nervous system, begins fragmenting as neural pathways fail and chemical communication between body parts breaks down. The seamless awareness that once coordinated your complex behaviors dissolves into isolated responses from disconnected tissue masses. Your identity as a unified organism slowly dissolves into its component parts. The reef around you continues its eternal rhythms, indifferent to your individual struggle, but enriched by your contribution. The nutrients released by your decomposition will fuel bacterial blooms that support countless small organisms. The calcium carbonate in your skeleton will eventually become part of the reef structure itself, providing substrate for future generations of marine life. Your remarkable journey from microscopic larva to apex predator to ecosystem component represents one complete cycle in the endless story of life in the ocean. The techniques you developed, the territory you defended, the offspring you produced, all contributed to the continuation of your ancient lineage. Your individual story ends, but the species continues, carrying forward the genetic and behavioral innovations that enabled your success. The ocean accepts your return with the same indifference it showed when you first settled on this reef so many years ago. The currents that once brought you food and carried away your waste now disperse your remains throughout the ecosystem. The chemical signals that defined your presence fade into the background noise of a community already adapting to your absence. New larvae drift through the water column above, some carrying genes you contributed to the population through decades of spawning events. They face the same challenges you overcame, equipped with the same remarkable capabilities that enabled your long survival. A few will successfully settle and begin their own extraordinary journeys from vulnerability to predatory dominance to eventual return to the elements. The last signals from your failing nervous system fade into silence. Your tube feet release their grip on the familiar rocks for the final time, and your body settles into the crevice that has been your home for so long. The current moves through your arms with a gentleness that would have been impossible to detect when your sensory systems were intact. Within hours, bacterial communities that lived peacefully within your tissues begin their final work. These microscopic partners who helped process your food and maintain your internal chemistry throughout your life now reclaim the organic compounds that made up your body. It's not destruction, it's transformation, the same process that has recycled life through ocean ecosystems for billions of years. Small worms emerge from the sediment, drawn by chemical changes they've evolved to recognize. They begin the careful work of breaking down your remains, each species specialized for different components of your complex structure. Your soft tissues disappear first, then the more resistant materials, until only your calcium carbonate skeleton remains embedded in the rock. But even this isn't the end of your story. Your skeletal plates will persist for years, becoming part of the reef's physical structure. Algae will colonize these surfaces, small animals will shelter in the spaces between them, and eventually other starfish larvae may settle on the very foundations you've left behind. Your body becomes habitat. Your death becomes opportunity for new life. The territory you defended for decades begins changing within days of your passing. Chemical markers that defined your boundaries fade from the water, dissolved by currents and metabolized by bacteria. Other starfish tentatively expand their ranges into areas that were once exclusively yours. The invisible borders that structured this small piece of seafloor are redrawn by the survivors. Your neighbor, the aging starfish who shared your final meal, continues its own slow decline in the emptying territory. Without the familiar chemical signals of your presence, it seems disoriented, moving through patterns that no longer make sense. The cooperative relationship born of mutual weakness dissolves with your death, leaving the survivor to face its final challenges alone. Young starfish begin exploring your former domain with the enthusiasm you once possessed. They discover the productive hunting grounds you identified through years of trial and error, the secure hiding spots you located during countless predator encounters, the optimal routes between feeding areas that you established through decades of experience. Your accumulated knowledge becomes their inheritance. The mussel beds you hunted for so many years show signs of recovery within weeks. Without your constant predation pressure, juvenile mollusks settle more successfully in areas you once kept clear. Population dynamics shift as your removal eliminates a key predator from the local food web. The ecosystem begins adapting to your absence, finding new balances without your influence. But the changes ripple beyond simple population adjustments. The genetic legacy you left through years of spawning continues to shape the starfish population long after your death. Larvae carrying your genes drift through distant waters, some eventually settling in reefs hundreds of kilometers from where you lived. Your DNA becomes part of the species' ongoing adaptation to changing ocean conditions. The spawning sites you helped establish remain active gathering places for future reproductive events. The chemical signatures you and others deposited in these locations persist, guiding new generations of starfish to optimal breeding areas. Your contribution to these traditional sites ensures their continued use, maintaining the reproductive strategies that sustain your species across generations. Environmental changes that stressed you during your final years continue affecting the surviving population. Ocean acidification, temperature shifts, and chemical pollution create ongoing challenges for starfish communities throughout the region. Your individual struggle was part of a larger story of species adaptation to unprecedented environmental pressures. Some starfish populations adapt more successfully than others, their survival depending partly on genetic variations. Individuals like you contributed to the gene pool The traits that enabled your long survival, patience, persistence, efficient energy use, become increasingly valuable as environmental conditions deteriorate. Natural selection continues the work you began simply by living and reproducing successfully. The reef ecosystem gradually adjusts to the loss of your generation of long-lived predators. Prey species that evolved defensive behaviors in response to your hunting pressure begin relaxing these expensive adaptations. Community structures shift toward new configurations that reflect changed predation patterns and environmental conditions. Years pass. The rock crevice where you spent your final moments becomes colonized by a diverse community of small organisms. Barnacles settle on surfaces your tube feet once gripped. Algae grow where your body once rested. The space that contained your individual story for so many years becomes habitat for countless other life forms. New starfish larvae continue arriving with each spawning season, facing the same challenges you overcame so many decades ago. Most die during their vulnerable planktonic stage, consumed by the same predators that threatened your own early survival. A few succeed in settling and beginning their transformation into juvenile starfish. One larva, carrying genetic material you contributed years earlier, successfully attaches to a rock surface near where your skeletal remains still rest. It begins the remarkable metamorphosis that will transform it from a swimming creature into a bottom-dwelling predator. The cycle begins again, powered by the same biological innovations that enabled your own extraordinary journey. The ocean continues its ancient circulation, carrying nutrients from your decomposed body throughout the global system. Atoms that once formed your tube feet may now be part of algae growing in tropical seas. Calcium from your skeleton might strengthen the shells of mollusks in polar waters. Your physical substance joins the planetary scale recycling that connects all marine life. Your story, remarkable as it was, represents just one thread in the vast tapestry of starfish existence that stretches back hundreds of millions of years. Your species has survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and dramatic changes in ocean chemistry through the same qualities that enabled your individual success: patience, adaptability, and the remarkable ability to persist in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. The techniques you developed for surviving in your particular patch of ocean join the collective knowledge that helps starfish thrive in diverse marine environments worldwide. Your individual innovations become part of the species-wide repertoire of behaviors that enable success from Arctic waters to tropical reefs. Life as a starfish might be rough, but there's another animal out there that has it way worse. Trust me, it's wild. Check out the video and see for yourself.